of you like riddles? Remember, Samson made a riddle at his wedding. He said, I'll give 30 sheets and 30 changes of clothes to you 30 guys that have come to my week-long wedding ceremony. If you can answer my riddle, out of the eater came forth meat. Out of the strong came forth sweetness. Well, today we're going to go toward a riddle that's found in chapter 17 of Revelation. And the riddle part is found in verses 9, 10, and 11. And it says, And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So that's the riddle we're going to head towards, but before we get there, we're going to start at the beginning of the chapter, and we're going to talk about the woman, and then the beast, and then we'll come to the riddle part. And the woman is talked about in the first 6 verses, where it says, And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, and I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. You remember that we are now in this part of the book of Revelation, chapter 12. We entered the most holy place where the marriage of the Lamb is to take place. And we've seen in there those who are going to be attendants at the wedding, at the marriage. In chapter 12, verse 1, we saw, And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And in verse 3, And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. When we got to chapter 13, we saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the names of blasphemy. And then in verse 11 of chapter 13, we met another beast coming up out of the earth that had 2 horns like a lamb. When we got to chapter 14, we saw that there was a lamb that stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 that had his father's name written in their foreheads. So we've seen a woman with the sun over her head. We've seen a great dragon. We've seen a beast from the sea. We've seen a beast from the land. We've seen the lamb. That's 5. And then in chapters 15 and 16, we saw the Father, God Almighty, in relation to the pouring out of the 7 last plagues. And now we're getting a second woman introduced to us, and this woman is called a whore or a harlot. And there came one of the 7 angels in chapter 17, verse 1, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, So right to begin with, this chapter starts different than most of the chapters we've had in this section. In chapter 12, it says, and there appeared. And in chapter 13, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw. In chapter 14, I looked, and lo, a lamb. And in chapter 15, and I saw. And in chapter 16, and I heard. And in chapter 17, it doesn't say I saw. It doesn't say I heard. It says something different. So we should note that. And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials and talked with me, saying, come hither. So the angel is inviting John to go to a different place than he is right at that time. He says, come hither, and I will show thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Well, we know that those many waters, it says in verse 15, are multitudes, nations, tongues, and people. So that means that this woman, and we know already that a woman refers to a church, to religion, and this woman is very, what? Popular. Because many waters is what she sits on. And then it says, not only is she popular, but it says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. So that means that the civil rulers, the kings of the earth, have gotten in bed with this woman. They've united with this woman. It's a union of church and state. The church has used the state for her ends, and the state has used the church for their ends. And that's the fornication it talks about, that this woman, whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So this union with the world has also produced false doctrines, and it's made the people of the world drunk. Maybe you heard the story of that girl that left a party a couple months ago in Northern California, and she was very drunk, and she disappeared. And they searched for her for weeks and weeks, and finally they found her car in a reservoir of water down deep. When you're drunk, you don't have good discernment. When you're drunk, your conscience is seared. And it says that the people in the world, they can't tell their left hand from their right hand. They can't tell what's right and what's wrong. So that says, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Remember, she's popular, and the inhabitants of the earth have drunk her wine, and they can't discern between good and evil. But then we come back to that angel, because that angel's not done. That angel wants to tell us directly where we're going. So it says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. So when it says in verse 1, come hither, where does he take John? To the wilderness. So John's not in John's day, and John's not in our day. John's in a day in the wilderness. Well, how can we figure out what day that is? It says, and he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads, and 10 horns. Have we met that beast before? Well, the beast in chapter 12 had 7 heads and 10 horns, and it was scarlet. But the beast in chapter 13 had 7 heads and 10 horns. And what else does it tell us about that beast in chapter 13? In chapter 13 and verse 1 it says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads, what? The names of blasphemy. And this one in chapter 17, it says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So this is that beast that we've already identified in chapter 13, that we've seen appear again in the 7 last plagues. That beast we clearly identified as the papacy, as papal Rome. And when papal Rome, we see her now, the woman sitting on papal Rome. But papal Rome is where when we see her here? Where is papal Rome in verse 3? Where? In the wilderness. So something has happened to papal Rome that she's now in the wilderness. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So if we turn to Exodus 28, we'll get an idea of how this woman is dressed. Exodus 28. And starting in verse 5, this is the priest's garments. And they shall take gold and blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen. And they shall make the ephod of gold, of blue, of purple, of scarlet, and fine twined linen with cunning work. And it shall have 2 shoulder pieces thereof joined at the 2 edges thereof, and so it shall be joined together. And the curious girdle of the ephod which is upon it shall be of the same, according to the work thereof, even of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. And you shall take 2 onyx stones, and grave on them the names of the children of Israel. So this woman that we find here sitting on the beast that's in the wilderness is dressed like what? Like a priest, like the high priest, right? She's wearing the clothes of a priest. And then verse 5 of Revelation 17, well, again in verse 4 it says that the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colored and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. A golden cup. And a golden cup, you remember that night that Belshazzar had his feast in Babylon? Because this woman's name is Babylon. It tells us that in the next verse. That night, where did they get the golden cups to drink from in Belshazzar's feast? From God's sanctuary. They were the cups of God's worship service. And what did they put in those cups? The wine of Babylon. People may today use nice words like from the Bible, like the golden cup. But if it's got the wine of Babylon in it, don't be fooled by the good words they say. So here, this woman has a golden cup, but it's full of abominations and filthiness. And her name, it says in verse 5, was on her forehead, Mystery Babylon, the great, the mother of harlots, and abominations of the earth. So this woman, this church, is a mother church. She represents all the churches that have abominations, that have false religion. This is Babylon. And it says, I saw the woman drunken. So not only does she make people drunk, but she's drunk herself. And what is she drunk with? Well, it tells us, and I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. This is a woman, a church, a religion, all false religion, represented by this woman, and she has been persecuting God's people. She's drunk with the blood of the saints, a persecuting church. But why is she coming to the marriage? You think she wants to be the bride? I think so. So we're going to have 2 women at the marriage, aren't we? One with the sun over her head and one dressed in purple and scarlet. You remember that 2 harlots came before Solomon? 2 women came before Solomon, and they were having a dispute of which one should get the baby that was still alive. And Solomon, what did he use to determine which one was the mother? What did he use? What did he use? Did he use an abacus? Did he use a scale? A sword. Yes, he used a sword. And Jesus, in the most holy place, will use the sword of the Word of God to determine which of these two women should be the bride. And the question again is going to be, which one loves the Son? In Solomon's day, the one that loved the Son said, no, don't cut it apart. I won't take half, just keep the boy alive. And the one that loves Jesus, of these two women, will be the one that's the bride of Christ. So she was called Babylon, the mother of harlots, the abomination of the earth. But the other woman dressed in the sun and the moon, remember, she was pregnant at the wedding. So both women are sinful, aren't they? But God has to choose between the two. And now we're coming to the riddle. Let's see. And the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. So the angel says, I'm going to help you with the riddle. We're going to come and we're going to consider the riddle. We're going to consider heads, mountains, and kings. And we're going to, with the angel's help, understand the riddle. The angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. And the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. So first it's going to talk to us about the beast. And it says, now the beast that you saw, where was the beast when John saw it? In the wilderness. The beast was in the wilderness, and he says, the beast was and is not and shall be. And who was the beast? What does the beast represent? The beast we identified in chapter 13. This is the beast that rose out of the sea, that lasted for 1,260 years, we learned in chapter 13, from 538 to 1798. What's the name of the beast? The pagan, not the pagan dragon, but the papal power, right? The papacy. And where is the papacy when John sees it? Here in this vision? In the wilderness. You might be helped by... That's one of my favorite letters in the alphabet, because my last name starts with that. But I figured that would help us, because in Daniel, the beast was called a little horn that came up among 10. Didn't it? But then here it says, and in chapter 13 it said, the beast received a deadly wound. But in here it tells us in chapter 17 that the beast will recover from the deadly wound. But not only that, then it says, and the beast will go into perdition. And the beast is going to go down again. So the little horn came up, who was the beast. He received a deadly wound and went down to the wilderness. He'll come back up again, and he'll go to perdition. So do you follow the picture? False religion is sitting on the beast. And when we see it, when John sees it, the angel said, come hither. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw the woman sitting on the beast. And the beast that thou sawest was, that means before John sees it, the beast had power. When was the beast power? The beast had power from 538 to 1798. In 1798, it received a deadly wound because the Protestant Reformation used the sword of the Spirit, and its head was wounded. So if the angel says the beast was, then we have to be after 1798 when we're here in the wilderness. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Have we talked about a beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit before in Revelation? Kathy says yes. Where did we see a beast that ascended out of the bottomless pit? Chapter 11, verse 7. That's not too hard to remember, is it? 7, 11. 11, 7. And it said there, remember there were 2 witnesses in chapter 11. And then it says in verse 7, and when they shall have finished their testimony, that's the 2 witnesses, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them, and their dead bodies shall be in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these 2 prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. There's the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit. We already studied in chapter 11. The 2 witnesses gave their testimony in sackcloth during the 1260 days when papal Rome ruled the world and drank the blood of the martyrs. And then in 1798, what power came up out of the bottomless pit? Up out of the earth. 1793. What? The French Revolution. Revolution and the rise of atheism entered and took over control of the thoughts of mankind. Atheism, and then expressed especially in communist atheism, that rose up, that destroyed the Bible. For 3.5 days they celebrated in France, and that grew into atheistic communism. It says, the beast that thou sawest, in verse 8 of Revelation 17, was and is not. So the papacy was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. It'll come back to power, and it'll end up going into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. So the bottomless pit beast is the one that takes over in 1798 while the papacy is in the wilderness. And that's where the angel took John. So are you ready to answer the riddle? If you know where you're at, in time, you're after 1798. And the riddle is going to be made clear because it says, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. So we need a mountain in each head. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. So we have 7 heads and 7 mountains. It says the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Remember, the woman is false religion, and she sits on 7 mountains. They're the same as the 7 heads. And the next verse says, and there are 7 kings. That word there in the New American Standard Bible says, and these are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. So if these are kings, we better give them a crown. So 7 mountains are the same as 7 heads, are the same as 7 kings. Oh, let's give them numbers. So there's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, and is there a number 8? Well, let's see. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And these, according to New American Standard, and these are 7 kings. 5 are fallen. Let's have 5 of these fall. So, number 1 is fallen. Number 2 is fallen. Number 3 is fallen. Number 4 is fallen. And number 5 is fallen. 5 of these are fallen. 5 of these are fallen. And 1 is. So there's the one that is, number 6. And 1 is. And the other is not yet come. So there's one that is and one that's not yet come. Number 7 hasn't come yet when John sees them. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast which was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So the 8th is the same as the one that was and is not. What's his name? What do we call him? The beast that was and received the deadly wound, and will come back. The one that was and is not, and will come back, and will end up going to perdition. The one that looks like a letter M, that came as a little horn in Daniel to power and destroy and got rid of 3 other horns. Then he got a deadly wound from the Protestant Reformation. He went down, but he's going to come back up, but then he's going to go down to be the last one into perdition. What do we call him? The papacy. So this is the papal power. He tells us the papacy is number 8, right? It says, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So, if he's the 8th, but he's one of the 7, then which one is he if he's one of the 7, and he's also the 8th? Well, the book of Revelation is closely tied to the book of Daniel. And the book of Daniel is where we find apocalyptic prophecy, where we find the timelines of Bible prophecy. And here John in Revelation is picking up the same ideas as Daniel was given in his book. And in Daniel, what was the first beast in Daniel chapter 7? I saw 3 unclean beasts come up out of the sea, and the first beast was can we call it baby? Babylon. And the next beast was Medo-Persia. And the next beast was Greece. And the next beast was pagan Rome. That's the pagan dragon. The pagan dragon that we've talked about. And it says 5 are fallen. Well, where was John? Well, John lived in the time of the pagan dragon. So some people like to say, well, we're there, so we have to find 5 before that. So we'll go Greece, Medo-Persia, Babylon, Assyria, and Egypt. But we've already seen that isn't where John saw this. John was taken into the wilderness. And in the wilderness, who was in the wilderness? The beast that had 7 heads and 10 horns, the papacy was in the wilderness when John saw this. So when John saw it, John was right here. He was taken way down here after 1798. So the beast that was in the wilderness is the beast that was, the papacy. That was and is not. Here it's not in world control. Here it's not in world control, but it'll regain world control as number 8. So let's go back over the riddle. Verse 19 says, let's start with verse 8, of chapter 17. And the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, and yet is. So all the world will wonder after the beast. That's what it told us back there in chapter 13. Remember, in verse 3 it said, And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. That's 13:3. And here it says, The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, and yet is. And here is the mind that hath wisdom. Here's the solution for the riddle. Here's the mind that hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. What did we learn last time a mountain represents? In Bible symbolism, a mountain represents a kingdom or a government. God's kingdom, Mount Zion. And so there are 7 mountains, 7 kingdoms, 7 governments. And it says, the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Who's the woman? False religion. Was there false religion that persecuted God's people in the days of Babylon? Oh, yes. They were going to put them in a fiery furnace. Was there false religion in the days of Medo-Persia when Esther lived? Oh, yes. They were going to kill everyone there. And was there false religion using the Grecian Empire and the pagan Roman Empire? The pagan dragon, the Roman Empire? Yes. Why, they tried to kill our Lord Jesus Christ, right? The Romans were used by the church. That was a false church. It turned false church at that time. And they tried to use the Romans. And then the papacy ruled the world for 1,260 years. And then she received a wound. And when she received the wound, she went into the bottomless pit, into the wilderness. And who came up? Who came up in 1798? Atheism. Or atheistic communism. When John saw it, that was who was in power. But that power ended in your lifetime, 1989. Is that right? 89, the Berlin Wall went down. And the mindset of the world in those years was toward atheism, humanism. All our universities in the United States turned toward humanism and rejected religion. But then comes, well, what would this power be? Well, we're told clearly in Daniel that after atheistic communism, then comes a new king of the north. And we also saw it in chapter 13. Who came afterwards in chapter 13, verse 11? Or you could leave off the A and just say us. The United States of America. And it says, and there was 7 kings, 5 are fallen, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, and the papacy are fallen when John is taken to the wilderness. One is atheistic communism, and one shall come and continue a short time. How long did Babylon last? How long did Babylon last? How long was the captivity of God's people? 70 years captivity. So if that wasn't a short time, you can expect this earth to last, this power to last less than 70 years. Came in the Gulf War and in the fall of the Berlin Wall. United States today rules the world, and we studied in chapter 13, she will use economics to control the world. Embargoes, buy and sell decrees. So it says, and these are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. The beast that was and is not, that's the papacy. He's one of the 7, and he's going to be the 8th.
Revelation 17 gives a glimpse into Earth's final events by presenting 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. The 7 kings refer to 7 world-dominating kingdoms, stretching from 600 BCE to the present day. These kingdoms are 1. Babylon, 2. Medo-Persia, 3. Greece, 4. Pagan Rome, 5. Papal Rome. These are the 5 fallen. 6. Atheistic communism is the one who is. 7. The United States of America is pointed to as the one who continues for only a short time. The next verse says, "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition." Scripture does indicate that the papacy will regain the power it held in centuries past.
Okay, so all we've said is that 5 are fallen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That 1 is when John is taken into the wilderness by the angel, and that 1 is yet to come, United States in prophecy. Chapter 13, 11, we studied about that. And then it says the papacy will rise again. But we haven't heard anything about that, so we're going to turn to verse 12, and it says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as king for 1 hour with the beast." So we have 10 horns. And how long are they going to last? 1 hour. How long is that in Bible prophecy? In chapter 18, we're going to find something else about 1 hour. But in Bible prophecy, remember, we had a half an hour in a previous chapter, and that was 7 days. 1 hour is going to be 2 weeks. Is that a long time? Not very long. For 1 hour, what are these 10 horns going to do? It says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast." These 10 horns are the same 10 horns of Daniel, chapter 7, the European Union. And it says, for 1 hour they will receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind. That means central government. These have one mind, and shall give their power and their strength unto the beast. So here we find that the beast that was there is going to come back and going to last for how long? 2 weeks under European support. The United States is going to lose its significance as a world power, and they'll have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb. We already talked about that war in chapter 16, the battle of Armageddon. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. That's the 144,000 that are with Jesus on Mount Zion. This is the battle of Armageddon, and Jesus wins. We saw the 3 unclean spirits that gathered the whole world to the battle of Armageddon, but here it tells us Jesus wins. And then the angel said, And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. Whoops! 2 weeks, they love her, and they support her. False religion, riding with European support, and then they turn on her. It says, and they shall hate the whore. The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is the great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And Jeremiah gives us that same picture in chapter 51, verse 13. O thou that dwellest upon many waters, abundant in treasures, thine end is come, and the measure of thy covetousness. The woman that dwells on many waters will come to her end. She will be rejected at the time of the last moments of this earth's history as we know it. So we've seen that the riddle is explained. The riddle fits all the characteristics of the chapter. That the woman that comes up dressed like a priest and wants to officiate like a priest is rejected and destroyed by the people that supported her. They turn on her, and we've seen now 2 women, 3 evil powers, and 2 good powers that come to the marriage of the Lamb. We have one more good power in chapter 18.